The Ledger
by Sebastian Winters.
Inspired by the truth too many faced. They brought Samuel Boone into the courthouse in chains, barefoot, blood dried in the cracks of his knuckles. The courtroom fell quiet as he passed, not out of respect, but calculation. He looked strong, too strong for a slave, too sure-footed for a man in irons.
The judge, a man named Broderick, with a face like stone and a tongue sharper than the gavel he wielded, eyed him warily from the bench. So did the 12 white men in the jury box. So did the defense attorney, Mr. Trask, who had the confidence of a man who believed the law had already been decided.
And perhaps it had. But still, the case of Boone versus Boone, a slave suing to remain free, would be heard. Not because justice demanded it, but because it was the proper formality before returning a man to bondage.
These cases were routine and almost never fell the plaintiff's way.
The courtroom air was thick with July, the kind of heat that soured shirts and shortened tempers. The gallery buzzed with whispers about how Samuel had struck a white man, how he'd escaped, how he'd lived as a free man in Ohio for nearly a year before bounty hunters had found him, had him arrested, and filed a petition to extradite him back to Kentucky.
They said he'd been whipped nearly to death once, then whipped a second time for surviving the first. That was when he turned on the overseer, nearly killing the white man before he ran.
Upon his arrest in Ohio, it was said that he told the sheriff, even in chains, "I'll never be a slave again." The sheriff had called it bluster. His attorney had done his best so far to make sure it became true.
Jonathan Greaves, Samuel's attorney, stood slowly from the plaintiff's table, his black coat wrinkled at the elbows, his hands calm despite the stakes. He addressed the jury with the quiet control of a man who knew noise wasn't his weapon, evidence was.
"We are here today because a man has claimed his right to remain free," Greaves began, "and because this court must decide whether the blood of a free woman can be erased by a ledger."
He stepped aside.
We call Abigail Dorsey to the stand.
Abigail entered slowly, supported by her granddaughter's arm. She was small, hunched, with eyes like dark marbles and hands bent like gnarled branches. The court clerk helped her into the witness chair.
"Mrs. Dorsey, did you know a woman named Dinah?" Greaves asked.
I did, she uttered calmly, her voice a thin reed. I midwifed 4 of her babies.
"Where was she from?"
Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
Was she born free? "She said she was. Said her father fought with Washington. Showed me a Bible once. Had her name and date of birth all proper. She could read better than I could."
"Did she have papers?"
She did, but the man who brought her down burned them up in front of her.
Who was that man?
They called him Silas Longmire. He weren't no slave trader, not officially, just the sort who found black folks up north and dragged 'em south.
"May it please the court," announced Jonathan Greaves, holding up a piece of paper. "I have here in my hands the court-ordered arrest warrant of Silas Longmire, who was convicted and later executed for a number of crimes, including the unlawful kidnapping of free Negroes and subsequently selling them into slavery."
He handed the piece of paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge, who ordered it filed into evidence.
Greaves continued.
And what happened to Dinah?
She was sold to the Boone farm. Not cheap neither. They wanted women who could breed.
Abigail's voice cracked then. She paused to swallow.
They bought her to make babies. That was the reason. Said so right out.
Greaves turned to the judge.
Your Honor, I submit the Boone ledger into evidence.
Judge Broderick gestured toward the bailiff. The book was brought forward, old, leather-bound, with ink faded by sweat and sun.
Greaves flipped to the entry.
Dinah, he read aloud, acquired 1810 from Silas Longmire, literacy noted, 9 offspring, each marked with initials H.H.
He looked up.
Horace Howard, the overseer. Samuel didn't move. He had heard it all before. Not just the ledger, the stories, the whispers. He had no real memory of his mother, who died giving birth to a 9th child when Samuel was 11, already leased to a nearby cotton plantation. Only her name, spoken in hushed reverence by others who had once known her, and the rumors that she had been born a free woman. He remembered a lash across his back as a boy when he had asked about her.
He remembered another boy dying for the same question a short time later.
He remembered, most of all, the sound of the whip falling on a man who dared to stand. That man had been brave, but that man had also, soon after, been killed.
The defense made their case quickly.
Trask painted a picture of legal order, property law, birthright, maternal descent.
Slavery passes through the mother, he reminded the jury. And if Dinah was bought, even from a thief, then she was property, and her children, by law, were born into bondage. Perhaps Dinah had legal standing to sue for her freedom, but that was never established.
He turned to Samuel.
Your Honor, not only was this Negro slave born specifically at a breeding camp for the express purpose of being a slave to the Boone family, who I might remind the court did no wrong, regardless of the fraud possibly committed by Silas Longmire, but this man is also dangerous. Need I remind the members of this esteemed jury that this slave struck his own overseer, beat him to within an inch of his life?
And what did Samuel do? He ran from his crime, from the justice of the lash, like the coward he is. He's already proven he's a danger, and now, until his arrest, he has lived among white women and white children unguarded. He is not safe to be released to himself as a free man. He's barely fit to be returned to slavery. As the court knows, the usual penalty for a Negro slave striking a white man is death. For once a Negro gets a taste of violence, they are almost always ruined for the job for which they were created.
His voice rose.
You are not deciding whether he ought to be free. You are deciding whether he is rightfully the property of those who purchased him in good faith.
Greaves rose again.
He did not pace. He did not shout.
He simply said, the Boones bought a woman from a known kidnapper, and they bought her for one purpose, to breed her. You know this. You feel it. He turned to the jury.
If we are to believe the law is blind, then let her theft matter. Let the burning of her papers matter. Let the man who raped her face the weight of what he did, not be rewarded with a legal heir he can claim as livestock.
He gestured toward Samuel. This man is not just Dinah's son. He is the son of a woman who should have lived free, and of a white man who used rape as breeding.
This man was never meant to be owned. He was born of people who should have been, by all rights, always free.
The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, they were pale and sullen.
The foreman stood.
We, the jury, find in favor of the defendant. Samuel Boone is and ought to be the rightful property of the Boone family. While we concede that his mother should have likely been kept free, this slave Samuel was literally born as the result of a breeding program. He was born to be a slave, and that's what he should be.
Greaves closed his eyes. Samuel opened his.
Judge Broderick leaned forward.
Samuel Boone, he said, you are hereby remanded back to the custody of the Boone estate under the laws of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You will be returned to them effective immediately.
A slow groan spread through the gallery. Cheers came from the Boone family.
Greaves reached for Samuel's arm, but Samuel had already moved.
In one clean motion, he twisted hard, snapping free of the bailiff's grip. With his wrists still cuffed, he lunged at an oak witness chair, grabbed its leg, and wrenched. Wood cracked. People screamed.
Greaves shouted, "Samuel!"
But Samuel was already turning, already raising the jagged chair leg high above his chest like a stake. His voice bellowed through the room, raw and ragged.
I done told y'all, I may not ever have the pleasure of breathing free air, but I will never be a slave again.
And with that, he drove the sharpened end into his own throat.
Once,
Twice.
he fell to his knees as blood fountained across the courtroom floor, soaking into the old wood, reaching toward the ledger still open on the bench.
Gasps turned to screams. The jury recoiled. Someone fainted. The judge stood, horrified. The bailiff shouted for a doctor.
But it was too late.
Samuel Boone collapsed forward, coughing blood through gritted teeth, and with one last heave of breath, he died face down beneath the flag of the state of Ohio. Not a free man, but as promised, also not a slave.
Janitors tried to scrub the blood from the floor that afternoon, but the stain would never fully come out. It would remain beneath the boards for years, under the heel of every judge, every lawyer, every juror who stepped into that courtroom.
A man had died there. Not as a slave. Not as a free man.
But as a man who refused to be either on someone else's terms.
A note from the author.
While the ledger is a work of fiction, its roots are buried deep in historical truth.
Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, free black men, women, and children were routinely kidnapped from northern states and border regions, then sold into slavery in the South. These abductions were often carried out by traffickers like the fictional Silas Longmire, men who operated in the shadows of a legal system that offered little protection to black Americans, free or enslaved. The most infamous real-world example is Solomon Northup, whose memoir, 12 Years a Slave, exposed how even a man with legal freedom papers could be stolen and silenced.
Equally harrowing are the true accounts of slave breeding farms, operations that sought to increase profit by forcing enslaved women to bear children for sale. These women were not just denied freedom, but denied bodily autonomy, often raped repeatedly under the guise of plantation management.
This system reduced human life to inventory, and many of those born into such conditions were branded as slaves from the moment of conception. And yet, against all odds, there were those who resisted, not only with flight, but with law. Enslaved individuals, especially those with free mothers, white fathers, or uncertain origins, sometimes used the courts to sue for their freedom. These freedom suits, while rarely successful, challenged the legal infrastructure of slavery and exposed its inherent contradictions. Men and women stood before hostile judges and all-white juries, demanding not kindness, but recognition as human beings with rights worth defending.
The ledger is a fictional composite of these realities, a story of what it meant to live beneath a system designed to crush, and what it cost to stand against it. Samuel Boone's fate is imagined, but his fight was real. It belonged to thousands.
And like Samuel, too many never lived to see it end.